Hi, everyone. Am I supposed to talk now?
Now, I'm going to read a prayer and introduce you. How about
Wonderful.
that?
That sounds great. I love that plan.
First, dear friends, on behalf of the Austin community, I want to welcome all of you that are here attending this talk from Rainn Wilson.
Everyone, am I supposed to talk now?
No. I'm going to read a prayer and introduce you. Okay.
Wonderful.
How's that echo?
That sounds great. I love that plan.
Okay. First, dear friends, on behalf of the Austin community, I want to welcome all of you that are here attending this talk from Rainn Wilson. Nabil, what's going on? We're hearing a playback type thing. Okay. All right. So welcome all. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. I'm going to read a prayer, then I'm going to read a very quick introduction to Rainn Wilson. I think most of you know him, of him. So let me read this. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art the helper and the Lord. So, dear friend, as you know, we do this on a monthly basis. Once a month, we invite a well-known speaker from somewhere to give a talk about the Baha'i faith and some aspects of the Baha'i faith that might be of interest. Rainn had spoken to us in October. I remember the date, it was October the 14th. So I remember that date quite well. And at that point, Rainn had suggested that there was a talk that he could give described as spiritual life hacks. And I really wanted to hear what spiritual life hacks he could share with us that would be useful in my day-to-day life. I really need a good dose of shortcuts to being spiritual. So thank you, Rainn, for agreeing to that. So Rainn Wilson is an American actor, comedian, podcaster, producer, and writer. He's best known for his role as Dwight Schrute on the NBC sitcom The Office, which, by the way, is on constantly on the Comedy Channel. It runs nonstop. So if you want to watch Dwight in action on The Office, American Comedy Channel. Podcaster, producer, and writer, for which he earned 3 consecutive Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. Additionally, Rainn has done a lot of different things. He does a podcast called Soul Pancakes. He is writing a book, which I hope will be available soon so I can share the title and where you can buy it from with all of you. Besides all that, Rainn's a funny guy, a good guy, and it's someone I really, really look forward to hearing from. So, Rainn, it's all yours. Rainn?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry for that delay.
Excuse me. Someone I really, really look forward to hearing from. So, Rainn, it's
Are we okay with that audio delay? Is everything okay, Nabil? We're all right?
Yes, I think one of our participants has the YouTube stream going as well, so the mic just needs to stay muted.
Okay.
We're good.
Great.
Did you make Rainn the co-host, Nabil?
Yes, I see I'm able to share my screen, so I will share my my PowerPoint there. Thanks very much, and apologies again. I showed up a little bit late here today, and then I just spilled my my drink on my desk. So I'm in need of some spiritual life hacks myself. Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and always lovely to see what you guys are doing in your community and with your friends. So yeah, so when I spoke before, I mentioned this idea of spiritual life hacks. And the reason I was thinking about it was I was thinking about how this was kind of a big thing about 10 or 15 years ago, where you would, on the internet, they would publish life hacks. Like, how do you make your life better with this easy time-saving, energy-saving trick? Can you make your life better? And it's very simple. I'm going to show a little presentation here and it has some examples, but like one was, if you're serving white wine, you freeze grapes and then you put them in the white wine. It keeps your wine cool, but it doesn't dilute the wine. I don't drink wine, but it's a very simple trick that supposedly makes your life better, and is very easy. And I was thinking about it in terms of spirituality, because sometimes spiritual teachings and the spiritual path can feel separate from our day-to-day lives. It can feel like it's remote from where the rubber meets the road, and how our lives work. Or it can feel philosophical, detached. And hold on one second. And I was thinking about this in terms of spirituality, because I was feeling like, well, shouldn't spirituality work in the same way? If spiritual teachings, laws, ideas, concepts, perspectives don't make our lives better tangibly in a day-to-day interactive way, then really what good are they? So I kind of put my mind to it, and this was actually on the book that I'm writing that Ajit mentioned. It's called Soul Boom: Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution, and I'll put the link in the chat, or maybe someone could find the link just on Amazon for pre-orders. It's coming out in April. I'd be happy to come back on and do another talk and be on time and do a talk about. And then this was originally going to be a chapter in my book, but the book kind of went in a different direction, and this may be a separate endeavor altogether, because I believe that this is not a Baha'i thing. This is an interreligious idea, that every religious faith and every great holy text in all of the sacred teachings and writings of the world's great religions, there are key ideas that can make your life better, one day at a time, and improve the quality of your life and enrich your life. Because, like I said, if it doesn't, what's the point? If a spiritual path does not enrich your life, focus it, bring clarity to it, improve it, then may as well just not have spirituality in your life. If you don't need it, I'm someone that greatly needs it. I have an anxiety disorder. I've had many different struggles in the past with mental health and otherwise. And for me, my life, when I haven't had spirituality in it, has been greatly out of balance. And I've had many struggles. I still have struggles with spirituality in my life, but when I am on the spiritual path, focusing my perspective with ideas around my spiritual reality, around the soul, around service to God and service to humanity, around the spiritual virtues that we all must embrace regardless of our faith background, like patience and kindness and humility and compassion. When I'm able to harness these great superpowers from all the world's faiths, from some of the oldest writings in human history, like the Vedas and Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the Torah, then my life improves. My life is actually better. It actually gets better. So let me just try showing this little slideshow. I'm going to share screen. So some of the examples I have are from the Baha'i faith, but there's examples from all different faiths, like I said. This is a poem I've used in my book. It's one of my favorite poems. It's a segment of a poem from a much larger poem by the great New Jersey poet, William Carlos Williams, one of the fathers of modern poetry. And it says, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserable every day for lack of what is found there." And I love this poem because I also believe that this poem could apply to spirituality. It is difficult to get the news from spirituality. It's difficult to get, a stock update or a bank statement or a Twitter feed or a weather report from spiritual teachings. Yet men die miserable every day for lack of what is found there. And this is true more and more in the modern world. I think one thing in my kind of research and my public speaking is that I've found is there is an incredible mental health crisis going on in the world with young people. People over the age of 50 or 60 seem incredibly oblivious to this fact, but it is incredibly relevant to young people in high school and in college. The statistics are astounding around this mental health crisis. It has to do with nearly a quarter of college students have suicidal ideation. Over 50% of them are suffering from some kind of anxiety or depression. Suicide is the #1 killer of young people. Young people under the age of 25 are now is now the loneliest generation. It always was people over 70 that were the loneliest people, and now it's the youngest on the planet. And I'm getting doorbells ringing in my ears when people want to enter the Zoom room. Is there a way for me to not do that? It's a little distracting. Maybe that's not. I'm not sure. I'm a host, but little is going ding dong when someone's coming in. Maybe someone can figure out how to turn that off. That would be great. So one thing I mentioned early on in my introduction was the idea of spirituality shifting perspective. And okay, I'm just going to ignore the dings. Welcome, Carlos. Welcome to the meeting. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I think if someone adjusts the host and takes away my ability to let people in the room, and we also turn the chimes off, it's an option in the settings, then that'll work better. Thank you so much. One of my favorite stories about shifting perspective and changing the world has to do with the arts, and why I believe that the arts are so important for a world embracing spiritual revolution. And it's one of my favorite stories. It's from the 1970s. I remember this when I was a kid. There was a scientist, I forget his name. I should have it written down here, but I don't have it. And he was listening. His friend was in the military and said, "Hey, check out these whale songs." This was in the late 60s. And These were songs of the humpback whale that had been recorded by military sonar. And this scientist, this marine biologist, was just stunned by how beautiful these humpback whale songs were. And he made his own recordings of them, and he was passing them around on reel-to-reel tapes everywhere he could. And there's a woman artist, I believe it was Carly Simon, and I can't remember her name now either, but she put these songs of the whale on her folk album in the early 70s. And more these songs, these whale songs, got out. And it's the number, he ultimately made an album called Songs of the Humpback Whale, where with orchestrations, they had whale songs in the foreground as kind of the haunting melody with an orchestra. And this is the #1 selling environmental record of all time. So let's go back a little bit. In the 1960s, the ecology movement started. There wasn't really an idea of having an ecology movement, a movement that would preserve and enhance and uplift the environment. This kind of started with Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, Deadly Spring. And the whale populations were plummeting. Whales used to be obviously incredibly prevalent, and then whaling, in the 1800s, whales were a source of energy, and we lit our lamps from whales. But once we got, petroleum and kerosene and whatnot, we put aside whale blubber, but still whales were being hunted and killed, and were just down in the hundreds. And no one could raise any attention to this, and people didn't know how to save the whales. And this album single-handedly saved the whales. It was the #1 album in 1979, and by the early 80s, the World Commission on Whaling greatly limited whaling. Right now, there's only 2 countries that still do very limited whaling: Japan and Iceland. And whale populations went down from several hundred blue whales to in the thousands, into the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 blue whales. The same is true for humpback whales, all because of a record album. So we think about saving the world, we often think about, and changing the world, we think a lot about legislation, right? We think about, we need a new law, we need to pass a new law. But sometimes we just need a movement and something that shifts our perspective. Because when people heard these enchanting, haunting songs of the humpback whale, it opened their hearts, it touched their hearts, and all of a sudden they wanted to be a part of saving the whales and part of this ecology movement, which really gained ground in the 60s and 70s. So what are life hacks? For people over 50 who may not have heard, I said, I use this as an example: store your grapes in water in the fridge, keep them fresh for 12. Oh, this is a different one about grapes. This is a different life hack about grapes. This is one from the internet. Store your grapes in the fridge, keep them fresh for 12 days in water. I had no idea. How about that? Wait, I'm so sorry. I'm on the wrong slide. Excuse me 1 second. As we move forward with these life hacks, we're talking about spiritual life hacks. And this is one of the perspectives that I try to align myself with on a daily basis. This is a quote from Abdul Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, whose name was Baha'u'llah, and Baha'is view Abdul Baha as a great spiritual teacher. And it says, man is in reality a spiritual being, and only when he lives in the spirit is he truly happy. This spiritual longing and perception belongs to all humans alike. So this is, for me, a spiritual life hack, because if I can wake up in the morning and in a process of reading the holy writings from the world's religions, of taking a few moments for contemplation and prayer, of entering into a state of meditation, this is one of the first ideas I try to surround myself with, that I am a spiritual being, and only when I live in the spirit am I truly happy. Because for me, I don't know how it feels for you, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm often a material being, right? I need to pee. I had to have a little coffee. I want to have some breakfast. I'm waking up. I'm thinking about what I got to do that day. I look at my calendar on my phone, and I'm living very much a material life, because we are on a material plane. We are living in a material world. So life hack number one is we are spiritual beings. When I can, through the holy writings, through my prayer and in my meditation, recognize that I am a spiritual being, and that when I live in the spirit, only then am I truly happy, this can greatly positively affect my life in that day. If I live a day where I forget that I'm essentially a spiritual being, oftentimes I'm miserable. I'm caught up in texts and emails and deadlines and Zoom meetings and pitch meetings and budgets and all kinds of appointments, and I forget that I'm a spiritual being. But when I'm able to touch in with my soul, essentially, on a daily basis, and I recognize, as Abdul Baha, so I'm going to agree with what Abdul Baha says here, that when I live in the spirit, I'm truly happy. That sometimes I can go several days and not be happy. I'm like, why am I not happy? Well, am I in touch with the fact that I'm a spiritual being? Well, no, I'm not. Well, then unless I do that, I can't be truly happy. So this is one way of looking at a spiritual life hack. Very simple teaching, just like the grapes, both of the grape examples, incredibly simple, one sentence long. And when I shift my perspective, just like that scientist shifted the perspective on the whales, then I can have a happier day. Here's another life hack. This is again from a quote from Abdul Baha. Several of these are. Abdul Baha says, always look at the good and not at the bad. If a man has 10 good qualities and one bad one, look at the 10 and forget the one. And if a man has 10 bad qualities and one good one, look at the one and forget the 10. So, very simple teaching. Incredibly relevant to our lives, right? Let's say we have an office job, no pun intended, and there's someone in the office that has one good quality. Let's say they've got 10 good qualities. They're great in every way, but they've got one bad quality. What it is, maybe they interrupt all the time. Maybe they have bad breath. Maybe they stand too close. Maybe they're impatient. Whatever it is, it can oftentimes, for me, I start to focus on just that one negative thing, and I start to forget all of the wonderful qualities. Oh, they're disciplined, they're collaborative, they're kind, they're joyful, and I always look at that one bad thing. So if I can, again, shift my perspective to just focus on the good qualities, then my resentment goes down. I'm much more able to interact with the person. And conversely, and this is much more difficult, if they have a whole bunch of bad qualities, they have one good quality. Maybe they're impatient, they're unkind, they're undisciplined, they're disrespectful, they're narcissistic, but they're clean. They're well groomed, perhaps. There's always one quality we can find to look at a person. And when I'm able to do that, my life is better. So in a workplace, for me, a workplace is like a film or a TV shoot. And or developing a material, as a producer, I need to, when I am able, let me put it this way, when I am able to focus on their good qualities, that's when my life is better. I interact better. I'm less resentful. I'm more positive. I enjoy working more. I enjoy interacting with folks more. Now, this doesn't have to be in a work environment. It could be a school environment. It could be on a local spiritual assembly. It can be your neighbor. It could be a family member even. But this is a spiritual life hack. You want to make your life better. Make sure you're focusing on the good qualities of a person. Now, there's a part 2 to this. I don't think I get to it here, but in the teachings of Abdu'l-Baha, if you dig a little bit deeper, what you're essentially doing is you're looking for that divine spark in every person, which every person has, which is evidence of God, evidence of the divine. You're essentially loving people for God within them. You're loving them for the divinity within them. And if you turn your hearts towards the divinity in every person, you're much more able to love people than if you are looking for their human failings. Let's continue. Here's another life hack. These are just a sampling, by the way. This is just a small handful. You could do dozens of these. These are from the Baha'i faith. And like I said, you could find these life hacks from many different faith traditions. Another quote from Abdu'l-Baha says, "Joy gives us wings. Joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness." I just love this quote. First of all, let's talk a little bit about what joy is. Joy to me seems a little different than happiness. Happiness is a word and an idea that I struggle with. I think that happiness is often a byproduct of other things. Joy seems to me like an energy. Like when I'm joyful, I'm tapped into a divine energy. It's a choice. It's something I'm bringing to the world. I'm going to bring joy. I'm going to bring a celebratory, grateful, positive energy into my interactions. So that's how I interpret it, at least. This idea that joy gives us wings. In times of joy, and I'm sure you can relate to this, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. So strength, intellect, and understanding are sharper. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness, which I think is a really important part of the quote, because that's what it's really all about. Like, how can we find our sphere of usefulness in the world? How can we be useful to our fellow human? And joy is a tool that can make our lives better. There's many quotes from the Baha'i faith about the powers of joy. And I like this idea that we seem better able to cope with the world and find our sphere of usefulness. Now, let me go back here. Now, as you remember, we are spiritual beings, and when we live in the spirit, only when we live in the spirit are we truly happy. So conversely, if we want to foster and nurture joy, we need to remember that we're spiritual beings. These are connected. So first, I kind of remember that I'm a spiritual being, and then I'm able to be truly happy. Then I can harness joy as a superpower, and I can better cope with the world, and I can find my sphere of usefulness when I've tapped into that. But I can't tap into joy unless I recognize that I'm a spiritual being to start. Here's another spiritual life hack. This idea that tests and difficulties have a purpose. Oh my gosh, look at that. I said purposely. Purposely. Terrible. One of my good qualities is not PowerPoint. It's not one of my good virtues. Not until man is tried doth the pure gold distinctly separate from the dross. Torment is the fire of test, wherein the pure gold shineth resplendently, and the impurity is burned and blackened. You know, I saw a YouTube video recently where, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I go down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos and it's about Formula One racing or ancient Aztecs or, all kinds of ridiculous, animals doing dumb tricks, whatever it is, cats playing the piano. But I saw one the other day where they were making gold, where they were like sifting gold and actually making gold. And I saw this happen. And essentially I always saw them panning for gold and you get little nuggets of gold, or they're mining for gold, but they just had all this clay and they knew gold was in it. I think they had tested it and they knew gold was in it. And they put this clay in a burner with kind of a mesh, and they lit it on fire, and it was literally boiling this dirt and clay. And then from that, the pure gold came out. So this is a very common metaphor and analogy that's used throughout, I think almost in every spiritual tradition, this idea of burning the dross to release the transcendent, beautiful gold. Wasn't something invented in the Baha'i faith. This idea runs through all the great spiritual traditions. The second quote says, "Tests are benefit from God, for which we should thank him. Grief and sorrow do not come to us by chance. They are sent to us by the divine mercy for our own perfecting." So, a couple of big things in this quote. Tests are benefits from God, for which we should thank him. Are you kidding me? That's the hardest thing to do in the world. Has anyone here really been like in the middle of a terrible, difficult test and been like, "Thank you, God. Thank you for having my child be sick. Thank you for having my dog run over by a car. Thank you for having me be evicted," or whatever it is. No, I mean, that is an incredibly advanced spiritual state to be in, to thank God for the tests that we undergo. But then he goes on, "Grief and sorrow do not come to us by chance. They are sent to us by the divine mercy," which is capitalized. So the divine mercy in that sense refers to God or the Creator, for our own perfecting. And I think about this in terms of our tests and difficulties. For me, a lot of folks know me. I've done dozens and dozens of roles as an actor. I did dozens in the theater for 10 years in New York City before I even came to Los Angeles. I did a good dozen or two before I did the television show called The Office. Since The Office wrapped 10 years ago, I've done dozens more roles in films and on television shows. That happens to be the one that people know the most, but it's only one. It was a big chapter of my life, but it's only one sliver of what I've done creatively. And early on in my career, I got out of acting school and I got cast in a Broadway play. And I had a lead role in a Broadway play, and immediately I went through incredible struggles. I was very nervous about this. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I thought, oh, this is going to make me famous, or this is going to get me an agent, or this is going to make me money, or I'm going to get a New York Times review, or I'm going to get, a Tony nomination. And none of that happened. As a matter of fact, I sucked. I was terrible. All that pressure that I was putting on myself for being in this role on Broadway was incredibly difficult, and I was terrible in the play. And there's nothing worse than being terrible in a play, because I did it for 4 or 5 months, 8 shows a week, and you go and you're not good. You're trying to make it better, but you can't really get yourself out of it if you've rehearsed it poorly, you didn't rehearse it in the right way. So it was painful. It was awful. I would be sobbing. I was in tremendous pain. My wife was going to graduate school in another state at the time. I would call her in the middle of the night. It was one of the most excruciating tests of my life. And I got bad reviews. People did not like my performance. And when I finished the play, I kind of like my worst nightmare had come through. Like, oh, I bombed on Broadway. Oh, my first crack at Broadway, and I sucked, and I was really not good. And at that point in time, as I continued with an actor, I fired my agents at the time, and I was like, I'm never going to go through that again. I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to put that kind of pressure on myself where I need to be something other than what I am. I'm never going to try and do some role to please other people or for some, accolades or prizes or rewards. And I really let that go at the time. And I realized a few years later, it was actually several years later, it was like 7 or 8 years later, I got cast in The Office, that I never would have gotten the role in The Office if I hadn't had that terrible test where I sucked on Broadway. Because one of the things it allowed me to do is to just be myself more in my roles, and to not try and be something that I thought other people wanted to see, but to just bring more of who I am in the roles that I played. So I'm so grateful for those tests. And I thank God for that test specifically. It was put there by the divine mercy for our own perfecting. During those 4 or 5 months, I was abjectly miserable. You can ask my wife, just in terrible, terrible shape. But it strengthened my abilities as an artist and opened up other doors in the future. So I think, I put number 4, tests and difficulties have a purpose. I think it's really important to recognize this, and this is something that I love about the Baha'i faith, and it certainly is in other faith traditions as well. But in contemporary society, I think a lot of people really lose track of this, and they really struggle with tests and difficulties. Oftentimes people who don't have a rich spiritual tradition and belief system around them really don't understand, why am I being tested? Why is this person sick? Why am I sick? Why is this financial struggle happening for me? And they really resent it, resist it. Oftentimes they're turned away from God. I have several friends who have really lost a relationship with any kind of creator or higher power because of difficulties that they have undergone in their life. It's as if God is there to shield us from difficulties, as if God is there to make sure we never have any tests or difficulties, when actually part of the reason the divine mercy is there is to help us perfect ourselves on this physical plane and gives us tests and difficulties. So it's a spiritual life hack in a way, a very simple remembrance of, like, when we undergo something difficult, like, oh, right, this is how you make gold. This is something I should be grateful for. This is something that will help me in my own perfection. my own perfecting. Here's another quote. You know, if you hang out with Baha'is enough, I don't know how many people here are all Baha'is. Baha'is are always talking about world peace and world unity. And which is interesting. I grew up in a Baha'i family, and I left the Baha'i faith for many years, for 10 or 12 years. I didn't want anything to do with the Baha'i faith or with religion or spirituality or God or any of that nonsense. I just wanted to go to New York and be an actor and live an artsy kind of bohemian life. But what's interesting is that, well, let me read the quote first, and then I'll talk about my own personal story. Peace must first be established among individuals until it leadeth in the end to peace among nations. Wherefore, O you Baha'is, strive ye with all your might to create through the power of the word of God genuine love, spiritual communion, and durable bonds among individuals. This is your task. There's so much in this quote. There's so much in this quote. But when I was growing up a Baha'i, my family was not very happy. My family was not very loving. So we were Baha'is, and we would talk about world peace, and we would talk about love and unity in a very theoretical way. But there wasn't a lot of love and unity in my family, and literally in my family. It was a miserable marriage. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of rage. There was a lot of resentment, a great deal of difficulty. And I always thought about that later when I kind of came back to being a member of the Baha'i faith and kind of found my own way back to my spiritual beliefs. Was when I stumbled on this quote, it was really revelatory for me, because as Baha'is, and this is a clarion call for Baha'is here by Abdul Baha, through the power of the word of God, to find genuine love, create spiritual communion and durable bonds among individuals. He's beseeching us to help create community. A lot of what Baha'is work on around the world is spiritual transformation and social transformation, and at the grassroots. And you may find this at a Baha'i Holy Day gathering or a Baha'i feast, at a devotional or prayer gathering, a meditation group, a children's class, a class for junior youth or for youth, a service project in the neighborhood, a home visit. All of these tools that Baha'is are using around the world to help build grassroots community. But we're talking about building peace among nations, which is, by the way, is considered crazy these days. When I was a kid in the 70s, we used to talk about world peace. Everyone talked about world peace. Henry Kissinger talked about world peace. Beauty contestants talked about world peace. World peace was something that was doable. It was something that was accessible, that it was just around the corner. Now, if you talk about world peace, you're naive, you're foolish, you're kidding yourself. It's never going to happen. Human nature is so corrosive and toxic. We're never going to have world peace. We just have to live with the fact that we're militant and aggressive and contrary and adversarial, and that's just the way it is. And this kind of what would have been called cynical in 1975 is now just de rigueur. So, but if we are, as Baha'is, seeking to find peace among nations, we have to create love, communion, and bonds in our communities, in our homes, in our families. So if you dream of world peace and your family isn't getting along, scrap the dreams of world peace and just focus on your family, or focus on your neighborhood, or focus on your local spiritual assembly, or focus on your cul-de-sac or your condominium complex, or your homeowners association, or your school where your kids go to school, or your workplace. That it's like that hippie bumper sticker, let there be peace in the world and let it begin with me. But it's true. We have to start very small. So and I find this to be a spiritual life hack, because I'm always remembering, like, hey, I might want to change the world. I might have an impulse to help change the world, but I should start with my family, and I should start with my neighbors, and I should start with the people that I'm working with, and I should start with my local spiritual assembly, and I should start with the people in my Ruhi group, study group, to find genuine love, spiritual communion, and durable bonds. If we're not able to do that, we won't ever be able to create world peace. And I think it's something Baha'is lose track of a lot. Here's another one. Unity and diversity. How unpleasing to the eye if all the flowers and plants, the leaves and blossoms, the fruits and branches and the trees of a garden were all the same shape and same color. Diversity of hues, form, and shape enricheth and adorneth the garden, and heighteneth the effect thereof. In like manner, when diverse shades of thought, temperament, and character are brought together under the power and influence of one central agency, the beauty and glory of human perfection will be revealed and made manifest. So there are, in the Baha'i writings, dozens, hundreds of quotes about this concept, about unity and diversity. Hundreds of quotes. It's kind of given a lot of lip service. Unity and diversity, unity and diversity, unity and diversity. It's something that contemporary American society is only starting to learn recently, understanding that having loving unity with diverse elements is the most powerful force in the world. It's the most powerful spiritual force. It's the most powerful force for social transformation. This certainly means people of different races, certainly. It certainly means people of different cultures finding unity. It certainly is people of different economic backgrounds and educational backgrounds, social classes. It's certainly all the genders. It's certainly all of those ways that we define diversity. But Abdu'l-Baha, in this specific quote, talks about diverse shades of thought, diverse shades of temperament, diverse shades of character. So we have to remember that too, that we want people with different opinions. We want people to not all think like us. That when we can create those bonds like we did in the last one, genuine love, spiritual communion, and durable bonds, especially among people who think differently than us, have different temperament, have different shades of thought, and different character than us. And again, certainly races, backgrounds, cultures, that kind of diversity is also what Abdu'l-Baha means. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of quotes around to that. But this one I wanted to focus specifically on shades of thought, temperament, and character, that if we can achieve unity with people that think differently than us and have different opinions, then we've really created a garden. And look at contemporary American politics, where people that think different are evil and want the destruction of America, whether on the right or the left. People that we disagree with, their way of doing things are the devil and are the cause of the disillusion of our country. Whereas this idea that we want people of different shades of thoughts, temperaments, and character, and then we can build unity among them, and that will create a really great garden. Because Abdu'l-Baha says at the end of this quote, if they're brought together under the power and influence of one central agency, the beauty and glory of human perfection will be revealed and made manifest. When I can again shift my perspective, just like the whale songs shifted the perspective of the American population, of the world population, about the importance of saving the whales, because it touched our hearts, this is another way that it shifts perspective. Here's another spiritual life hack. Every day, Baha'is say one of 3 obligatory prayers. This is the most commonly said one because it's the shortest. And contained within this prayer is the idea that our life has a purpose. See if you can find the purpose in the prayer. I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my poverty and to thy wealth. There is none other God but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. So obviously it's right there in that first sentence. So this whole prayer that Baha'is say every single day is 3 sentences long. It says, we have been created to know and worship God. So I believe that Baha'u'llah has given us a spiritual life hack, right? We say this prayer every day, we open our hearts, we turn to our Creator, and we're reminded of why we are alive and what our purpose is, what our meaning is. And it's to know and worship God. Now, that could be a whole other talk. Maybe I even talked about that last time I was with you guys, about what that means to know and worship God. Because it's, at first blush, it feels pretty simple. Know God, I guess read holy writings about God. Worship God, say prayers. At first blush, that's what it means. But if you start to unpack it a little bit differently, deeper, it gets very, very complicated. In the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, to know God is to know thyself. That's interesting. We know ourselves, we know God better. In the Baha'i writings, it is said, work in the spirit of service is worship in the eyes of God. Oh, so already, if I know myself better, and if I work in the spirit of service, then I'm knowing and worshiping God. So it's like peeling an onion. It goes deeper and deeper there. The arts are worship in this day and age, creating art. Knowing one way to know God is to know science, to study and learn science. So it gets very, it has many deep reverberations to know and worship God. It's not as simple as it might seem at first blush. Is that it? Okay. So those are 7. There's infinite more. Very simple teachings, yet incredibly profound teachings, that if we can just simply remember those on a daily basis, we remember what tests and difficulties are for, we remember what our purpose is, we can look for the good qualities in people, we can live in the life of the Spirit, that if we can pay attention to these very simple spiritual laws, we make our lives better. We can, I believe, on a daily basis, have a richer, deeper, more effective life with practical spiritual teachings that shift our perspective. I often find that these life hacks, when you're talking about them in terms of in a spiritual sense, it's about shifting perspective. Like I said, we often wake up in the morning, we have a very physical perspective. We need to use the bathroom and make our breakfast and drive our kid to class and pay the bills. If we can take that little bit of time to recognize that we're spiritual beings, and that if living in the spirit, we can become truly happy. And then we can harness the power of joy in so doing and bring joy, spread joy, build community, a unity and diversity on the local level, and understanding that peace begins with us. It begins in the family, it begins in the home, it begins at school, it begins in the office, it begins at the local spiritual assembly, in the Ruhi class, and the church, and wherever you are. All of these are connected, and they're all eminently practical, and they make certainly my life better, and I believe they can make your life better. And it would be very interesting to invite folks of various faith backgrounds to come to this talk, to this gathering, and talk about the spiritual life hacks or the teachings that make their lives better. Because once again, like I said at the beginning, if spirituality, if walking the spiritual path doesn't make your life better, then let it go. It's not worth it. It's too much work. It's hard. So just live a material life in the physical life, if that's the case. So thanks very much for letting me share these thoughts with you. Great to see you all. I guess we can do some questions if we want, or I'd love to hear what people think. I would love to, by the way, put this in terms of questions, and I'd love to just nip it in the bud about one thing that would not be helpful right now is for someone to hold forth, to monologue to us about. That's my job tonight. I'm the monologuist, to monologue your ideas. But a question would be most valuable, and especially from questions from people that are newcomers to this group. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you. If someone wants to MC that, Ajit, you want to?
Yeah, I will.
So much.
There is a question from Marie Perez. She says, "Hi, Rainn. Big pleasure to be here. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I want to ask your advice on how to live with the illness of your mom who has Alzheimer's and not get depressed."
Wow, that's a tough one. I'm going to do a little, before I go there, I'm putting the link to pre-order my book here. I'm doing a little blatant self-promotion. Forgive me. It comes out in April. I'm just getting started with letting people know about it. So please pre-order, tell your friends about it. Be very helpful.
The title?
It's called Soul Boom: Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. So it's very inspired by the Baha'i faith and has lots of Baha'i ideas in it. I have a whole chapter on the Baha'i pilgrimage that I took. There's a chapter on God and one on death, consciousness, and social transformation. So using spiritual tools. So I hope you'll check it out. Maybe I'll be by your area doing a reading at some point this spring. Maria, was it Maria? Who asked the question? Forget the woman's name.
It was Marie.
Marie, okay. I'm very, very sorry for what you're going through. It's incredibly difficult. I can't even imagine how hard that would be. I recently moved my mom into a senior living facility, because she's losing her eyesight and she can't live on her own anymore. It's just getting too dangerous. And that was very difficult, but she still has all of her cognition. I think that with any test that we undergo, it's really important to feel the sorrow of that test and to grieve. Even when you look at the stories of Baha'u'llah and of Abdu'l-Baha, in the tests that they underwent, they allowed themselves to cry, to grieve, to deeply, deeply feel the struggles. When Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah were dealing with covenant breakers and betrayal from within their own family, Shoghi Effendi, they felt racked with grief. You don't read stories about them being like, "Bup, bup, 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 bup. Yeah, tests are great, woo!" So it's really important to really grieve that loss and to understand too, Marie, that again, like the quote I shared about tests and difficulties, but also that we all have a limited stop on this planet and we're all here for a limited amount of time. Hopefully we get 40 or 50 years. Maybe we get 60 or 70 years. Occasionally we get 80 or 90 years. But this is all part of a long process. And it's called the development of our soul as we move forward to meet our Creator. So death is coming to all of us. Great pain is coming to all of us. Disease is coming to most of us. And I don't say this to be dark or macabre. It's just true. In contemporary Western society, we don't really look at death and suffering very much. We don't really take it in, examine it, ponder it. I don't know if this makes anything better, but the Buddha, one of the central teachings of the Buddha is that life is suffering. And I find that very helpful because when we recognize that our life is about suffering, we are going to suffer. We are material beings. We're going to get sick, and people. And now that I'm in my late 50s, I've had several friends die in the last several years, including my father a few years back. And you start to see that more and more, and recognize that death and suffering are very much a part of life. And it doesn't make it easier. We still have to be sad and feel those feelings and grieve. But it's part of a much greater plan, God's magnificent plan to bring all of us beautiful, lovely, radiant souls together in the divine garden of love and eternity. And so the more we can focus on that big picture, the better. Thanks so much. Any other
there was
questions?
A question here. Let's see, I just ran past it. Lots of people saying thank you for a great talk, by the way. There's a question here that says, hello, Rainn. I was wondering, how does one get to know God when trying to overcome religious trauma? Thanks to my childhood religious teachings, God is very scary to think about, let alone connect to. Scary God.
Yeah, I get that. I understand. I relate to that. I don't think that I grew up with religious trauma per se. I know several people that did. I remember speaking to this English film director. I was working in England on a project, and we were in a church, touring a church, and he said, I understand that you're religious. I was like, yeah. And he goes, you believe in God? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I don't. I was like, oh yeah? And he said, oh yeah. As a child, I was dragged to church 3 times a week, and I had to be an altar boy, and I had to wear the robes, and I had to fold the robes, and I had to put out the incense, and I had to sit through endless church services, and like, oh, there's no way I believe in God. Now, we could see a little faulty logic there, right? Like the unfortunate behaviors that his parents forced him to undergo as a child have nothing to do with the reality of a creator or not. I have a chapter on this in my book, so I think what you should do is pre-order my book. That's terrible. I should stop promoting myself. But I will say that for me, one of the turning points for me in kind of rediscovering my connection to my own higher power was reading, I wonder if I have some books here. Reading, I thought I did. I started reading many books about Native American spirituality. And when I learned some really beautiful teachings about the idea of the Great Spirit, and especially I was reading about the Lakota Sioux, and the concept of God is called Wakantanka. And I had the great privilege of speaking to a dear Baha'i friend, Kevin Locke, who recently passed away, about this concept. And when I was in my 20s and read about Wakantanka, how the name translates to the great mystery, and that Wakantanka is not a being, not a man with a beard, not a father, not a grandfather, not a patriarchal figure, but was an energy, was something closer to the wind in nature, that it was an eternal, powerful force that reverberated through all living things. And that was beyond time and beyond space. And when I started researching more about Wakantanka and this idea, I started to really understand, like, oh, wow, I don't know that I believe in God. I'm still struggling with God, but I can definitely believe in Wakantanka. I can definitely believe in the great mystery. And I love the idea of being connected to a great mystery, something beyond time and space. So whatever path you can undertake to, often through different spiritual traditions, Buddhism, Native American indigenous spirituality, there's a wonderful book by Annie Lamott called Help, Thanks, Wow. It's about prayers, and it's about the 3 different kinds of prayers, which are help, thanks, and wow. Help, like help me out, I need help. Thanks, gratitude, prayers, and wow, awe, mystery, gratitude at the mystery of the universe. There's a lot of resources out there, but you have to not be lazy. You have to do a little reading, and you have to do a little digging, and some meditating as well. And I often find that a connection with nature, to me, is where I'm most connected to a higher power. Not on a Zoom call, not even necessarily at a prayer gathering, but when I am able to undertake the mystery of the stars at night, or the mystery of hummingbirds feeding, the mystery of the sound of the wind in the trees, that's when I'm able to most connect with the great mystery myself.
I have a question. I'm just going to ask it. For me, there's a lot of challenges posed by living in a material civilization. And as much as I would like to be spiritual, materialism always seems to get in the way. Making money, doing this, having a house. How do you overcome the material society that we live in to become spiritual? Do you take a vow of poverty and chastity? What do you do?
Well, that's a great question. The That's a great question. I remember being a part of a conversation and someone said, what's the biggest idea humanity has ever come up with? And the answer we all landed on was money. The biggest idea that humanity has ever come up with in its past 10,000 years of civilization is money. In fact, the earliest documented writing was a bill for labor and how much something cost. That doesn't mean it's the most important or the best. I'm just saying it's the biggest idea. Money, the paying off of money, debt, accrual, finance, and that's unfortunate. And we need to replace that idea with something larger and grander, like, oh, I don't know, world peace. But Ajit, I don't have an answer to that, but I do think that, I go back to that first idea that man is in reality a spiritual being. And only when we live in the spirit are we truly happy. If I can train myself if I can be in the day and be like, wow, I'm really unhappy, then I go, why? Well, I've lost track that I'm a spiritual being. We need money to survive. We got to feed our kids, right? We got to keep the lights on. We can't go just, live in a cabin in the woods. We're trying to build a world civilization. We're trying to create grassroots unity in our diversity in our communities. Yeah, so for me, it's just making sure I spend the time every day in prayer and meditation, recognizing and attaching to the idea that I'm a spiritual being in a material world. And if I can harness that joy and spread that joy, then I can remind other people like Ruben and Nabil and Hedi's iPad that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the great Drizel Cedarquist is here, ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorite Baha'i authors. Love her book so much about Baha'u'llah, one of the very, very best ones, if not the best one. So, hi, always nice to see you, Madam Cedarquist. Any other questions?
There was a question from John Pills. He wants to know if you'll do this talk in Florida and Clearwater. And I responded to him personally that he can contact me and I will put him in touch with Lisa. So she can.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And hopefully I won't be as late.
Well, there you have, they're 1 hour ahead of us, Florida. They're East Coast time. So just, okay. Other questions, Nabil? Any questions from YouTube?
Yes, I do have a question, but I wanted to comment that it's such a wonderful incident with talking with an avowed atheist. I like when I meet someone who has the guts to say they're an atheist. I say, well, I'm a Baha'i and I don't believe in the same God you don't believe in.
Nice.
Because their concept of what people mean when they say I believe in God is what's hindering them. But my question is very personal. You created a thing called Soul Pancake, and I have been able to explore it a little bit, and I'm just really impressed. It's a beautiful idea, and I think it is really reaching a lot of people. If you could just tell us a little bit about how that idea came up and how you put it together, it would really be
sure.
Nice.
And how to get on your blog from the Soul Pancakes.
Right. So it's not a blog and it's not a podcast. It's a digital media company. And it's a little harder to find these days because we sold it to another company called Participant Media. But if it's mostly, you'll find our video content on YouTube. And if you look up Soul Pancake content on YouTube, you'll see our various videos and whatnot. It was actually my first book was Soul Pancake: Chew on Life's Big Questions, which is a wonderful. I don't really get much money from this. I'm not trying to plug it. It's just a really nice thing to share with folks. It has a lot of life's big questions. Why are we obsessed with talking about other people? Has a lot of wonderful spiritual ideas in it. How do we find calm in a chaotic world? Yeah, thanks. It was great. We about 12 years ago, we started Soul Pancake, which started as a website and became then a digital media company. We made digital content, thousands of pieces of content, 3,000 with several billion video views, all uplifting content to bring people together, kind of based around big spiritual ideas. And it was a really wonderful endeavor. Like I said, a few years back, we sold it to Participant Media. So that the content's all still up there. It might be labeled under Participant Media, but wonderful shows about spirituality, about death, about life, about love. Yeah, and from Soul Pancake, I had a short-lived video show called Metaphysical Milkshake, which was a talk show in the back of my van. And then I turned that into a podcast called Metaphysical Milkshake. So you can find those episodes of Metaphysical Milkshake anywhere you get your podcasts, which are talking about life's biggest possible questions. But thank you very much. Nice to see you, Rennie and Dave, and everyone out there in Fish Creek, Wisconsin.
Final comment, Druzel comments that regarding Marie's question. She says it's also helpful if a person can get support, loving friendships, and other with whom we can laugh and enjoy life. And that support, that community sense, I think, is what Druzel is emphasizing. By the way, Druzel is my neighbor. She lives within a mile from me. So
you're a lucky man.
Well, I only see her on Zoom.
Oh no, you need to change that immediately.
She sees my wife more often. They used to go walking. I don't know what happened, but I see.
Broke my foot. That's what happened.
You broke your foot. I told you not to go out. I told you not to go walking with Martha. You'll hurt yourself.
I'm good. I'm good.
Sam C has made a comment. Nabil, you want to read it?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Okay.
It says, I'm just learning about the Baha'i faith, and everything you shared was incredibly insightful. I appreciate it and your time. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sam, I met her at the Baha'i Center, I think, a few weeks ago. Or is it a him? I don't know. This was incredibly fun. This was great. I mean, Rainn, you need to come back when the book hits the bookshelves. We are, of course, going to get one, but you need to come back and talk about your book specifically and tell us, make a presentation on your book.
I would love that. I would love to come back.
Did you grow up in Marin County, California?
No, I did not. Seattle, Washington. Yeah.
I knew your dad when he worked for the National Center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We lived in Evanston when your dad and mom were there. So
wonderful. Wonderful.
I think I knew you as a mischievous kid.
Yes, that was me.
Child.
I was a troublemaker. Thank you so much for having me. Any last questions?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated your discussion of tests and difficulties. I think, and your sharing your own experience. It's really helpful and insightful to hear how somebody else handled that stuff.
Yeah. Shar Troyer. Shar, I know Shar. She used to live in Houston. Shar, if I'm correct, Shar would love to have you visit a Peoria Fireside. So she's inviting you back to Illinois during the summer months, I suspect. I want to announce to you that our next speaker is also from Seattle, actually. Her name is Zabine Van Ness. And Zabine was born during the war in Germany when Germany was being bombed to pieces by everybody. And so she has survived the bombing, the Allies bombing Germany and etc. And she's done wonderful things. She runs a place called the Baha'i History Museum. It is now called the it's called the Baha'i History Museum. Anyway, a wonderful place to visit if you are interested in going out and seeing Baha'i history develop over times. And she's right across from the University of Washington, so a lot of young people drop in on her museum all the time. So she's going to talk about her life and how she has survived and thrived under very difficult circumstances. So I'm looking forward to February 3rd talk by Zabine Van Ness. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you immensely, Rainn. I know this was, the time is challenging, I know. But thank you very much for doing this for us. And again, I really look forward to having you come back again soon. In fact,
thank you so much.
Now that COVID is over, perhaps you can come to Austin in person. We'd love to have you here.
It's a great town. I love the city, the great city of Austin. I love it. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for attending. Wonderful.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night and see you all in February.